Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and this is episode 389. I am joined, as always, by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPatton89 on Twitter. Stacy, how are you doing on this rather glorious Tuesday morning?
Doing pretty glorious. Watched. I'm in the home of the now national back-to-back national champion Yukon Huskies, so it's pretty glorious here too.
Yeah, well, they really, I mean, that game was a joke, honestly. And look, college basketball is what it is. I enjoyed my month of caring about college basketball, but I can't say I will miss it. But we're not here to talk about college basketball or pass on our critiques of college basketball. We are here to talk about the New York Knicks, and we will do so. But before we do that, I have a few announcements to make. The first being that Strickland has Instagram. Check that out. That is at the Strickland on Instagram. We are posting all kinds of new content on there. Strickland also has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you already not done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.thestrick.land. There's a link that will take you to the merchandise store, and we can find all kinds of new. You can find all kinds of cool stuff there. T-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. The Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gives you access to Pod Strickland, the podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes from Obvious Bows, our newest podcast that is hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, along with Zach Blatter. And you get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I rant and rave about the Knicks even more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Miranda, one of the best in the business. And now you get access to Strictly NFL, our newest podcast that, you guessed it, is hosted by Constantine Metricos and is about the NFL. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and a $100 tier that's comes with a variety of additional benefits like listen to pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-host a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without our wonderful sponsors, BetOnline. The tournament is here. BetOnline is your bracket headquarters for the season with the best bracket contest out there, and odds, lines, and info on every game and every round right up until the national championship. You can access the most up-to-the-minute wagering information anytime from your desktop or your mobile devices, and even track your bet real-time all the way through the tournament. Head to the BetOnline app today and get in on all the action. Remember to use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline. The game starts here. Hey, Believe Nation, as you all know, we've partnered with Cut, the social betting platform. Cut is a peer-to-peer betting platform that allows you to bet directly against your buddies and other fans. That's right, you can join the Believe Knicks crew on Cut today and bet directly against myself and Stacy Patton on your favorite sports, pop culture, and politics topics. Cut is the ultimate put your money where your mouth is platform, and it's legal here in New York. Be sure to follow at CutBet on all your social media channels and download the app via the App Store or cut.com. Use code BelieveNix, BLEAV Nix, for a 10% deposit bonus. All right. Now that we're done with all that, after much ballyhoo, we are here at the podcast. I don't know. The Knicks won a pretty, I don't want to say an epic game on Sunday. It's not exactly epic against a team that had lost to the fucking Wizards and all kinds of bullshit teams leading up to this game. But the Knicks, look, they were dead on their feet, I thought, on Friday against Chicago. And they were down double digits at halftime against Milwaukee. They again got off to a very slow start in the game, but made an epic comeback in the second half, to be honest. And they outscored the Bucks, I believe, 72-48 in the second half. Ended up winning 122-109. Jalen Brunson, 43 points, 8 assists, another ho-hum, extremely awesome game from him. I actually ended up watching, a lot of highlights and shit from this game last night on YouTube. And, obviously I did the Brunson highlights. And I was thinking to myself, like, Brunson has had a lot. Like I don't know the exact number, but I'm like, wow, like getting 40 points now in a game is not a big deal for Jalen Brunson. And I don't know. I'm just so impressed with the season he's having.
Yeah, I mean, so he's had. I'm just looking it up now. Just especially this season, he's had. It looks like um, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 40-point games, including 2 50-point games. I believe they both came in losses. Ironically enough, it had the 61 point against Wemby and the Spurs. It yeah yeah it was so I'm saying that was one of the 2 50-point games, so the 50 plus. But it is very surprising when it's more surprising when he has an off game than when he goes for 40. To be honest, at this point, he has really stepped it up. He's like a snowball gaining momentum. That's kind of how his game is. Like, it's kind of like a bowling ball in the paint. But he's just, we had all of that talk earlier this season about the 1A thing, and I'm not here to clown anyone, but it's worth noting that he's improved.
I'm here to clown people. I am here to clown
But
people.
even at that point, we would have probably said top 15 guy, which he wasn't even getting that level of respect. Yesterday, I mean, he was the best player on a floor with Giannis and Lillard, and to your point, it wasn't all that surprising. He was the best player on the floor. He's been the best player on the floor against when they've played against Jokic. He's been the best player on the floor. He had an amazing deal with Wemby. Wemby was 40 and 20. So if you want to say Wemby's team won, he is more often than not the best player on the floor. Forget about, when they first said it, that was disrespectful because like there is a team where Kyle Kuzma is the best player. There is a team where DeMar DeRozan is the best player. There is a team where, is it Cam Thomas? Is it Mikal Bridges? So but we've gone way beyond that. More often than not, he will be the best player in a series. And that's, in fact, the biggest advantage the Knicks have. This used to be the team that, the thing that people would say is in the playoffs, depth doesn't matter as much. The Knicks have great depth, but you need that top star. Now it's almost the opposite, where they're trying to figure out how to survive these non-Brunson minutes. We can talk about that because I think that's been a change since, that we had those 2 back-to-back losses. Very frustrating. Felt like the Knicks could have won both San Antonio and then there's Oklahoma City game, and they were plus 37 across. They were plus 20 against the Spurs in Brunson's minutes. Plus 17 against a pretty damn good Oklahoma City team in Brunson's minutes with a really good starting lineup. Obviously, maybe Shai Gilgeous-Alexander wasn't 100%, but he still played pretty well, hit the game winner. So you lose those 2 games. I do think the last 3 games, Bogdanovich in particular has helped stabilize those bench minutes. They won the bench minutes against the Bucks both stints. There's only so much you can say about Jalen Brunson. He was, they talked about him a lot on yesterday's Reddick pod with it was the old man in the 3. He had Nikias Duncan and Steve Jones on. They actually shouted out friend of the pod, Chris Persianen. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I know
Enemy of the pod, as far as I'm concerned.
Honorable, a solid showing in the Strickland emoji tournament as well. But Chris had this tweet where he said, Brunson's probably a top 15, 17 player. He's thought of more as a top 30 to 40 player. There's this delay. And it's funny because Reddick was like, they went beyond that. I think a lot of people in the replies were like, top 15 is probably conservative right now. And I mean, how many series, if you look at it, how many series will the Knicks not have the best player? There's a strong case that he's better than Jason Tatum. I know you're all bought in on that. There's a strong case.
Do you still think this is a debate?
I mean, I think Tatum's pretty good. I'm a little bit higher on him than you. He has less pure defense.
No. I'm not. The question isn't, is it a fucking debate?
To me, it is, yeah.
No, that's not the question, though. The question is, yeah, I can debate you on anything. You can debate fucking the weather. What is, like, who's better? If you had to pick
Tatum.
one guy right now, who are you picking?
Tatum.
Yeah, that's very fucking close. Bananas to me. That's bananas to me.
Very close. Crazy. Though. It's definitely not clear cut.
I think it's clear cut. How is it not clear cut? What does Tatum do at such an elite level that Jalen Brunson does not do? I want to know what it is.
He can't be targeted as much on defense.
That's it. That's that's not an elite trait. That's just
Probably a
a
little
thing that
bit
he's okay
he's
at.
going to be better at getting a shot off against length.
Is he? Is
I
he?
think
Is
so.
he? He's going to be better getting a shot off against what? Like what has he proven that he's better getting a shot off against?
We
I'm
haven't
not understanding this. Like you're saying you're presenting a thing that is like based on his physical dimensions. And that's fine. That's all well and good. If you're like Luka Doncic. Okay, yeah, he can get a shot off against anybody. Got it. Jason Tatum is not that guy, man. Like, I don't know. I don't know, man. I just don't understand it. Like, and there's really
if
this
we're
is
going
like if you look at any literally, I just fucking did this yesterday. If you look at basically any advanced metric, EPM, offensive EPM, estimated wins, box plus minus, VORP, any of this stuff. You look at any of them. Jalen Brunson ranks higher in every fucking one. Everyone. Like literally, you can go do it if you want. You can go and look at it. Not only does he rank higher, he ranks basically in the top 10 in all of these. Like I don't Stacy, I believe
so what I'll
you're
say is this.
anchored in
What
your priors. I believe you're being anchored in your priors, and as a student of the game, disappointed in you.
a couple things. One, let's not act like Tatum is having a scrub year. All right. The guy's averaging 27, 8, and 5. On a loaded team. And I think that is the biggest thing that I would give to Brunson is that you put Tatum on this team. It is dubious that he would have maybe the same level of impact. But he's shooting 47 from the field, 38 from 3-point line, and a healthy 8.2 through threes a game. Gets to the line about 7 times a game, shooting well there. Pretty
Wow, what a
well-rounded
fucking
player.
foul grifter.
And then, that is the insane, the dark arts. You can also look. There was a recent post. Brunson has dropped a bit. If you look overall against top 10 defenses, his true shooting goes for something like 60% overall against everyone else to 54% against top 10 defenses. Guys who I would put him ahead of, like Durant, like Tatum, don't have that level of drop off. And so in a playoff series where you're facing that level of defense, that's what I mean by getting the shot off against length, against elite defenders. We might get to see it because there's a good chance Tatum is going to be defended by a guy named OG Anunoby that Brunson doesn't have to go against him. I'm not going to hold it against anyone who takes Tatum over Brunson. I think the advanced stats are pretty clear. He's 8th in the league. But I think that I don't think it's fair necessarily to penalize Tatum just for his team being stacked. His numbers are pretty good. He's been rebounding the ball well.
We all know Jason Tatum has always been penalized so much during his career. Just he's had it so hard.
Well, that's why he needs guys like you to bring up the other side of the equation. I don't think it's crazy to think Tatum is better than Brunson. I don't think it's crazy to think Brunson's better than Tatum because of the height and and just kind of a little bit probably more stability against elite defenses. And the fact he can't get attacked on defense the same way.
The stability against elite defenses is so irrelevant to me. It's actually completely irrelevant to me, and I'll tell you exactly why. One, Jason Tatum can never be targeted defensively the way that Brunson is. It will never happen because you literally fucking cannot, because their team is fucking stacked and they play 5 out, and every other guy on that team can create a shot. Put Jason. I would love.
Are you talking about on offense? You're talking about when the Celtics have the ball.
Yeah. Okay. On offense.
I was talking about targeting him on defense. But
I don't know. I get that, but I'm talking about the point of his fucking Jalen Brunson's efficiency drops off against top 10 defenses. Oh wow, is it maybe because the top 10 defenses in the league can throw attention at him in a way that they can't do to Jason Tatum? Probably. That's probably fucking why. I don't actually think that matters at all. And actually, if anything, I feel even stronger about my case. The fact that they don't feel that threatened by Jason Tatum, that they are completely changing their coverage. Like, show me a game. I want to see a game this season where Jason Tatum got defended the way the Heat were defending Brunson. I want to see that.
I mean, Reddick talked about this too. The coverages they're throwing at him. They've thrown box and one at Jalen Brunson. Mm-hmm. I think the only other player I've seen, and this is the playoffs, get a box and one is Steph. So I think that's a pretty fair point. I mean, he's facing, and they've done a good job. I think the other guys deserve credit. Hartenstein's been great off the short roll. Hart's been making good plays, but
I mean,
he's adapted
these
everything.
guys are good at taking advantage
Advantages.
of the advantages created for them, but they can't create advantages.
Literally, no one
And
else on the team can.
yeah,
That's
I
worth
mean,
noting.
right now, especially,
With
nobody
Randall out.
can.
With Randall
Yeah,
out.
yeah, exactly. And obviously that's been the biggest problem for the Knicks, especially in the non-Brunson minutes. But they have found a way. They have found a way to keep, they keep keeping on, and I don't know. I'm just like really, really happy and proud and appreciative of this team because to me, like they've done everything that I could ever ask and hope for as a fan. They have obviously battled through a ton of adversity. They've battled through injuries. They have overcome, scheduling annoyances and blah blah. But they've been great, and they still have a shot at 50 wins, which is crazy to me. They play
I mean,
tonight.
I think that's more likely than not because they should beat Chicago twice and Brooklyn. And then it's a question, and Boston is already resting guys, right?
Yeah,
Like
Boston's
Boston,
been resting guys, but they go. Obviously, they're at Chicago today. That ends their road trip, or actually, it doesn't end their road trip. Then they go to Boston on Thursday. Then they go from Boston on Thursday. Then they go down to New York. They play the Nets at home at MSG.
well, they'd be
Uh,
playing the Nets at home no matter what. So
yes, and then they close the season on Sunday, I believe, against the Bulls again. So we'll see. 50 wins. I wouldn't say it's more likely than not. That's just not how probabilities work. You should know this, Stacy. I can't believe that you said such a disgustingly false statement.
I
But
do think they would be favored in every game, assuming Boston's resting guys, though.
yeah, no,
Which is
they'll
not the
definitely.
same thing to your point as more likely than not, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just shocked that somebody as well versed in math as you would spout such ridiculous lies.
That's racist.
It's not racist. That's actually true. This is actually true. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, either way, the point is like the fact that they're even in this position. I mean, they don't necessarily control their own fate as far as getting the 2 seed, but they actually have a shot. They've got a legitimate chance to get the 2 seed at this point, and to be in that position after losing Randall for the rest of the season after the last game he played was January 27th. So he's been out, and he will continue to be out, obviously, for the rest of the season. And then
You have
basically not,
19 games of OG. That's all they've had. So on
yeah,
top of, you can almost count that as a double loss because to get OG, they traded away 2 guys that were pretty important contributors who they needed,
they
right? And
sold our soul.
um, yeah, I remember somebody saying that at the time. But no, it was I think that it's a testament to the whole team. And I think it was very frustrating to finally get the news for Randall because I really did think this was a finals caliber team with him. I'm a little bit more skeptical than that, but at this point, you don't believe in this team at your own peril. And I think it's Embiid is tough with the Sixers are tough with him back. The Bucks still for 7 games is going to be a tough series. The Magic are no joke, but this team can play with anybody, even Boston. And I think the other guy we should be giving some credit. I think everyone on this team. It almost feels like I don't have the heart to criticize them at this point. No pun intended. But that back-to-back loss to Chicago, after a crazy comeback against Sacramento, it's second game of a back-to-back for a team that's in some ways running on fumes a little bit. That was, it was heartening to see them come back. But I think that they, that's an understandable loss to me. Chicago. It's like there were the Sacramento game took a lot out of them, obviously, and it's the night before. But I think it's worth looking at Thibs and giving him a lot of credit as well. And I think sometimes when people say that, they do tend to like shit on the roster, right? Like he's taken this team and I don't mean it like that. I think this team is well constructed. They lack shot creation, but the guys around Brunson do fit very well. But you look. I was thinking about it today. We don't talk a lot about the fact that Thibs, what he took over. Obviously, the Knicks were not in a good situation at that point. They were coming off a 21 win season, but he took over in the middle of a pandemic. With a lot of new faces. That's something that never gets talked about. That probably wasn't the easiest thing, right? And we had and every year he's adapted. He took a team that was really Julius Randle and a bunch of rookies and role players and a career year from Derrick Rose to the fourth seed. He didn't have Mitch most of that year. He had Nerlens Noel and Taj Gibson playing heavy minutes at center. Constructed one of the best defenses in the league, with multiple not great defenders around them. Then the next year was where I think the low point, and me and you were both pretty out on Thibs at that point. And compared to that year, the big story of the second half of that season, aside from the fact that he was starting Burks at point guard, was the blown leads. And you saw they went 3-17 from a stretch. There were multiple double-digit blown leads. I think they had multiple 20-point blown leads in the second half. And I think you and me both pointed out you would see quickly want to push the ball, and he would slow him down. And you flash forward to this year, and they don't blow leads. I mean, that Oklahoma City game was that notable, and had nothing to do with Thibs. That was just the second unit. Brunson has to rest at some point, and the second unit, gave up a 10-point lead. I think they've blown like 4 or 5, maybe the record in the second half when they have a double-digit lead is insane. And I think part of it is you don't see him slowing them down. He's been very comfortable allowing players to play to their strengths. He's for a guy whose reputation was kind of a curmudgeon, a control freak, he's allowed. I mean, I think Hartenstein has one pass a game that you're just like, what are you thinking, man? But he's given that freedom, and it's a worthwhile trade-off because Hartenstein makes a lot of these creative plays, backdoor cuts, finding guys. Hart is allowed to push the ball whenever he wants. And that's a guy whose decision-making can be suspect at times. He has that freedom. Jalen Brunson obviously has more freedom than he's ever had in his career. And they've done all of this while maintaining their identity on defense. Thibs deserves a lot of credit. The nature of this business, as they continue to ascend and grow, at some point, if he truly cannot get over that playoff hump, maybe the Knicks will have to part ways with him. That's just the nature of this business. There are great coaches who ended up getting fired or let go because they couldn't get over that hump. But I have to say, I won't be happy when it happens. And I think you want to say Van Gundy made the finals, fine. But I don't think it's crazy to say Thibs is the best coach since Pat Riley the Knicks have had at all.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that. Actually, I agree with it. Van Gundy was very good. But I think the 99 miracle run, I mean, and look, I guess if you make a run like that, it has to count for a lot. But I think given the state in which he found the Knicks, or in which I guess not that he found them, but in which he arrived in New York, Thibs has had to do. I mean, he did a lot of the legwork. You know what I mean? Like
he found love in a hopeless place.
I mean, he did. But he built this up, or he at least was a huge part of building it up. And has he had his kind of setbacks and his shortcomings? Sure, yeah, he has. We've talked about them extensively, and I stand by all my past criticisms of him. But
wouldn't you say it's fair to say he's improved on a lot of those things? Slowing down the team year 2, he's shown adaptability that I don't think either you or I thought he was capable of. At that
time. I mean, this year has been his best coaching season as far as I'm concerned. He, he's genuinely showed a creativity and a willingness to adjust and adapt, generally and even in game in a way that he hasn't previously. And obviously we won't know what he will do once the team is at full strength, but like you look at the way he shifted the offense since Randall's gone down, and the difference is pretty stark, and it's not just stylistically, but also like, look, he's had to overcome his, I don't want to say obsession, but his look, if you were to say what are the things that Thibs cares about the most, what does he prioritize? Rebounding and rim protection would be the two that come to my mind, and I guess the third would be possession battle. So taking care of the ball, all that stuff, rebounding. That's tied to rebounding. And he has had to adjust even from that and be willing and adaptable to playing Josh Hart at the 4. I mean, look, OG's back now, so however you want to say whoever is the 4 in that lineup, I don't really care. But like he was literally playing, Deuce, Brunson, Dante, Josh Hart as a starting lineup with a center, Hartenstein, however Stephen A. Smith wants to say it. But like he adjusted, and yeah, you can sit there and tell like, well, you should have done that a long time ago. Precious at the 4 wasn't working. Like, I get all that. But I think it's fair to like, this is a man who obviously has been coaching in the NBA for a long, long time. He has very developed, very established core principles. And so for him to move off of them, it takes something. So yeah, maybe it took too long, but he did it. And for him to even do it, I mean, this is a guy that started Elfrid Payton the whole fucking season. You know what I mean? And Elf was terrible. Elf was awful by every fucking metric that is possible to be judged on. And
what about that dog in him?
Yeah, no dog, as far as I'm concerned. Honestly, though, Elf, it sucked that he got shit on the way he did in New York, myself included. I shit on him plenty. Seems like a nice guy. But anyway, also really good stories about how David Fizdale was a joke. But like, I just have a lot of respect for the way he's adapted this season. And, I think people in general probably should. I think he's earned a lot of benefit of the doubt. It's probably the best way I'd put it. Like when he fucks up at this point, and he does fuck up. He fucked up on Friday against the Bulls. I was saying it during the game. But like he I actually wonder. So against the Bulls, just so people are clear on what we're criticizing, or what I'm criticizing rather. He played a bunch of minutes in the first half with Bojan and Burks together on the floor. Took Deuce off actually in that situation to bring Brunson back in. That lineup was atrocious, predictably. Thought that was a big fuck up at the time. In the second half, I'm pretty sure he just played Deuce the entire time.
So, Burks hasn't played since that stint.
Yeah, he has not played since then. And again, I think Deuce played the entire second half. I said that at the time too. I was like, this makes no sense unless Deuce is going to play the entire second half and he's just kind of saving him for that. Maybe that was part of it. And maybe he was like, hey, Alec Burks, I'm giving you one last shot. I doubt he said that to him, obviously, but in his head, he might have been like, I'm giving him one more shot and I'm going to let it roll. I'm going to see what happens. And if it doesn't happen now, then I'm done. I'm moving off that. I don't think that's unreasonable to think he might have done that. And in general, he's just been really flexible with this stuff. Like against Milwaukee, I actually didn't think Precious was atrocious in that game or anything in the first half. I thought he was okay. But in this, like, he didn't play in the second half. He didn't, right? He played Bojan over him effectively, and
he even went with Hart at the 4.
Yeah,
on Giannis.
Yeah, and so like this is the stuff to me that I'm like, okay, like. He has earned the benefit of the doubt to me that when he makes, on the surface, a logical decision like he did on Friday against Chicago, I think that there's probably an actual legitimate reasoning for it. And I am willing to try. Like, I will extend him the courtesy of trying to understand his logic now in ways that I did not prior. And
that's very magnanimous of you.
Thank you. And I think that us as fans, like, we should extend that to him and we should extend that to the team because, like, in 3 of the 4 years that he's been here, yes, of course, his second year in New York was a disaster in a lot of ways. We don't need to be traumatized by that anymore. But in 3 of the 4 years he's been here, the team has covered the over on their Vegas over-under, by the way. But so they have, I would say they've achieved exceeded expectations. Thank you for giving me the word. They've exceeded expectations. And more than just, fucking forget the expectations, but like more than that, they have always found a way when it looks like it's gonna fall apart. Oh, it's coming apart at the seams. Like when things look like they're about to fall apart and everything's about to become a mess, they found a way to punch back and get back to some stable ground, string together some wins, and that is a characteristic of this team, regardless of how shorthanded they are, regardless of injuries, regardless of who they're playing, circumstances, back-to-backs, whatever. Like, they find a way. And life finds a way. But like, they do. And I just think that, like, what more can you ask of Thibs at this point? I mean, yes, we will see in the playoffs, how much this newfound willingness to be flexible works, but like, what more can you really ask of him? What more could you ask of this team? I think both parties here, players and coaches, coaching staff, just deserve a ton of benefit of the doubt from us as fans because they've given us, honestly, last year was so much fun. And I think we'll look back at this season when it's all said and done and feel, wow, like, even this was even more fun. And not just more fun, but I think the stakes change when you trade for OG. And I was worried about, well, what will this do for vibes and all that type of stuff. And it's hard to say it. Like, hard to say the vibes are anything but immaculate, as Jalen Brunson would call them. And that's a credit to him as a leader of the team, as a player, and also credit to Thibs kind of being able to foster such an environment. And I remember when he got hired, one of the reasons I was happy, or at least I was very okay with hiring him, was, I remember looking back at, like, watching those Bulls teams that he coached, especially in the years where Rose was out and they're shorthanded, and kind of like, not kind of, just straight up being jealous of their culture and their ability to fight through adversity, fight through injuries, and all that type of stuff. And I was like, man, if he could bring that to New York, that'd be amazing. And lo and behold, he has. So he deserves a ton of credit for it, just like Jalen Brunson himself does, and also other players. I mean, let's not forget that Jalen Brunson wasn't here the first 2 years of Thibs' time here. So a ton of credit for the culture that was established needs to go to the players that helped do that. Mitchell Robinson, Julius Randle, both guys who are still here, and guys that have gone. Emmanuel Quickly, RJ Barrett, very specifically. So yeah, just and also Taj, by the way. But yeah, just I'm just like very, very satisfied right now as a fan of this basketball team, and I don't think I've been this satisfied with a Knicks team since, I don't know. I don't even remember when. Long.
Feeling satisfied, Teddy? Yeah, I mean, it's also, it feels like there's been so much criticism, not criticism, right? But the backhanded stuff. We talked about the 1A thing. There was criticism of the trade. There are still people who say we shouldn't have made the OG trade. And there's something up. There's something.
What is the? I don't actually understand that argument at all.
Well, he got hurt, and they sold low on the kids, and
did they?
How had an awesome game.
I know you're not saying this. I know you're not saying this, but What's the argument for them selling low?
No, did I say sell low? I just meant sell early. That's what I meant. Sorry, not sell low.
Did like I don't know that's even. I actually was thinking. It's funny you mentioned this. I was kind of just thinking about this to myself the other day. Couldn't you argue that we know that this front office is obsessed with winning on the margins and they focus on value and all that type of stuff. Couldn't you argue that they basically got the most value you're ever going to get from Emmanuel Quickly in his career? Not in terms of just pure on-court production. I'm talking about on-court production compared to
contract.
Yeah. Like, I feel like it's really hard to argue that they did not give them enough time and did not maximize their value. I actually think, like, I will always believe that to some extent Thibs did not maximize his value with how he used him. But generally speaking, from the front office point of view, I think that it's hard to argue that they didn't maximize him both as a player in his time here and ultimately as an asset.
Yeah, I mean, I think the guy, the way he's played in Toronto, I think is in line with what I would expect. He looks like a above average starting point guard at age 23, 24.
Yeah.
And
it's important to note that at the same age, like, this is not to say he's gonna end up having the same exact fucking career, because that's not how it works. But like, Brunson was viewed as what, a nice bench guy at the same point in his career.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, I was always, I never was. There were people who instantly boxed Quickly as a bench guard. I was never that low on him, but I also, it was
not as high as some people though, unfortunately.
I still don't see superstar like Brunson level, or maybe makes an all-star. I see Mike Conley, honestly, which is, I mean, Mike Conley at one point was the highest paid player in the league.
I see Mike Lowry.
I see a little bit of Lowry too, not Mike, but his cousin Kyle, who also is in Miami. Oh no, he's in Philly now, right? They're both Miami at one point. Is there a new one coming out, Bad Boys?
Yes, there is.
There's another one.
The last one was actually really good.
Which was that the third one?
Yeah, I don't even know what the hell the name of it was.
I saw the second one with Gabrielle Union. I remember that. That was the last one.
Yeah, I remember that too.
That's what I see. But like, I also didn't see a superstar, or like a perennial all-star or something like that. So I think, to your point, yeah. And once he gets paid, and I think about how many guys you can actually say they have gotten the most value relative to contract for that player. Jalen Brunson, I think it's safe to say this is the most value anyone will ever get. He's being paid $23 million to be, as you said, arguably a top 5 player in the NBA, certainly top 10. They're getting, Hartenstein is making $8 million a year. He's easily a top 10 center. I think Mitch was, and Hartenstein looks better than him right now. And he looks better than Mitch did even when Mitch was having a career season. And part of that is, he's a little more well-rounded, but, that's another great contract, right? Randall's on a great contract. OG for the moment is on a great contract. So they Dante, awesome contract. Is anyone going to get better value than the Knicks are getting this season for $11 fucking million a year from Dante DiVincenzo? So to your point, I think it applies to a lot of these guys. And but I think there's something also, the front office has made these bets, and when you help on defense, or when somebody freelances, they say you have to make me right? If somebody swipes down on a passing lane or whatever, or if they help, the guys around him, you have to make me right. And this team is excellent at that, particularly Dante and OG. But Hart as well. This team is excellent guys who just execute their assignments pretty flawlessly. Even Bojan, I thought he played pretty solid defense against Milwaukee.
I thought he was fine on defense against Chicago too. Like, I know that people were like, "Oh my God, DeRozan's frying him." It's like, dude, DeRozan gets those mid-range spots basically against anybody at will. If you're going to put him on an island against DeRozan, I don't really know what more you can expect. And also, I want to say this: that fucking and one he got called on was bullshit. He didn't touch DeRozan. He didn't touch him. That was a bullshit call. But yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. So no, you're 100% right, and I think Bogdanovich. We should talk about it. I think the bench's improved play he's been a part of that, a big part of that. But my point is, this team has made the front office right. Right? They say we're going to make a move. We're going to trade away our young guys for a guy we think they made him right. Right? We are going to this year. Our title hopes rest on the idea that Brunson is a top 5, top 10 player. And every time, then we say these things. We said them early in the year, and people, the mainstream media, everybody, every other fan base, it's just been fun to just been proven, just to see this team prove them wrong over and over and over again. And like run through a motherfucker's face over and over and over and over. But that's been a lot of fun too. Just every time there's a ceiling, but Brunson is obviously at the center of it. But there are people who made fun of the DiVincenzo move. There are people who, Hartenstein last year didn't look like it was going to work out at times, right? They continue to prove everybody wrong, and it's been fun to be if you're a pessimist, then your expectations have been pleasantly, beaten. And if you're an optimist, you've gotten to say, like, I believed in it, and they're proven right. I don't know where I fall on that spectrum exactly, but with a few of these guys, I think it's Deuce, right? Last year, there were people who said, I don't think Deuce is going to be able to shoot. And he gets in the gym. He now is one of the best shooters on the team.
Bitch, you wasn't with me shooting in the gym?
Yeah. I think, maybe he'll be a Knicks fan now too, right? Doesn't he hop on the bandwagons all the time? If you're tired of Toronto, bro, you can come down here.
No.
We don't fuck with Drake.
Leave Aubrey up there.
But to your point, that's been a really fun part of it. And the last thing I'll say is, you mentioned this a lot. 2012, 2013, that felt like, okay, we are depending on the last legs of Jason Kidd and all these other vets, and career year from JR. This feels more. It feels like this is just the beginning. And saying that after, knock on wood, things still have to click, but their magic number is 1. So if that happens, this would be 3 times in 4 years the Knicks have made the playoffs, which hasn't happened since the 90s. Not even close. Or actually, they did do 4 years with Melo, right? Okay. So, but it's certainly, it's 3 years in 4 years where they have looked like a contender. They look like a contender right now. And it still feels like the beginning. So it's been, I don't think that I've ever experienced something like this as a Knicks fan, at least since the 90s. That's the last time I can remember, like, every year we expect to be in it and we just expect to get better. So,
yeah. So it's a fun time to be a Knicks fan, and it's a fun time to be a Michigan fan also.
Great to be a Michigan Wolverine.
It is. But yeah, like, this team just feels. Yeah, I wouldn't even say that they're at the start of something, because I feel like that stage has happened. We've already done the start, but they are definitely in the midst of something. And, a large part of that. And I think it's important to say this, because all of us, myself included, like, it's human nature. If you're not seen, you kind of get forgotten, right? And I think it's important to just say, like, Julius Randle is a key part of all of this. And all the praise, rightful praise, adulation that Jalen Brunson gets from Knicks fans, and kind of the way he has become. Honestly, I think it's fair to say he's the face of New York sports right now. And all that is deserved.
What about Danny Dimes?
He is the face of New York sports in all the ways that I'm sure that Giants fans wish he wasn't. But like, I just think that it's important to just give Randall a lot of credit too, and he's been a big piece of this, and unfortunately he's not here to close out this season, but he hopefully will be back. Maybe we'll be back. But you're talking about being at the start, or however you want to phrase it, but like, they're definitely in the midst of this kind of window of contention. And I would say the primary reason or the biggest reason for that is because of Jalen Brunson. And this kind of leads to one of the main things to consider when the Knicks move to the offseason, which will obviously happen at some point. I think it's fair to say neither of us believes that they're likely to win a championship this year without Julius Randle on the floor.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Obviously, you can't control for that. Julius Randle's injury is very much a freak accident. And look, I want to say this too. It's been fun to shit on Jaime Jaquez, and I do think that play was a little bit reckless, but like he obviously, to me, it's crazy to think that he was intentionally doing anything. I think he was just trying to make a play. It's stupid, but he's trying to make a play. Unfortunately, Julius got hurt, obviously. But like, Jalen Brunson's in his prime, and like, I think we have to we were talking about this earlier on the pod, and we've talked about this on previous pods, but like, Jalen Brunson's elevated to a level I don't think anybody expected from him, even people that were the most optimistic about signing him. And you have to adjust how you operate because of that. Because I
want to throw this out there though. I tweeted when they signed him before he played a game as a Knick. I said this guy's gonna average 25 and 7, average 20, and a lot of people were like, "No way, dude." Averaged 24 and 6 last year. He's averaging 28 and 7 this year.
Something like that, yeah.
Just wanted to throw that out there.
Kudos to you, Stacy. Nobody believed in you.
Nobody believed in me. Or Brunson, more importantly.
Yeah. But like when you're playing at the level he is, which I think at this point I'm like, Jesus, he's like an MVP caliber guy. So it's like a top, at worst, what's a top 10 guy. When you have a guy like that, you have to have he's in his prime years. This is not like he's 22 or 21 or he's 36. Like these are his prime years. He's 27. This is the best years are yet to come, effectively. This is when he should be peaking. When you have a guy like that, you have to have a sense of urgency. You've got to operate like every year needs to be about trying to compete. And obviously this year they were set back by injuries that are totally out of their control. And look, they obviously made a move to try to compete now, right? Getting OG Anunoby. So obviously they operated as such this year. But there's a lot of discussion. We've had a lot of conversation in our Discord about this, but like, obviously Dante DiVincenzo's had a phenomenal season. And he's one of the best value contracts in the league. But if you're talking about trying to win, maximizing Jalen Brunson's window and all those type of things, a guy like Donovan Mitchell, who, look, I'd be shocked if he is a Cleveland Cavalier at the same time next year. I think I'd be surprised if he's a Cleveland Cavalier come September. You know what I mean? I just think he's gone. And I didn't feel that way a couple of months ago. They were in the midst of a huge winning streak. He was balling out of his mind. But things have changed. And things done changed. But if you have an opportunity to get him and it costs you a guy like Dante DiVincenzo, like I understand what DiVincenzo's done for this team this year. I understand how good he's been and blah, blah, blah. I get all that. But Donovan Mitchell is a superior offensive player. He is, there are a lot of metrics that'll tell you he's considerably better, but I think it's fair to say, or safe to say rather, that he's at least on par defensively with Dante DiVincenzo. If you have a chance to pair those guys together, now that you have OG and we've kind of seen how that all works, I don't know, man. I just think there's a price there, and I don't think it's going to cost you what it would have cost us a couple years ago, right, when he got traded from Utah. There's a price there where I'm happy to I'll take that risk, and not just because I want to take a risk or not just because I want to add Donovan Mitchell, but because I think we have to be more aggressive and have a greater sense of urgency now that Brunson has established himself at a level that is, I mean, it's a superstar. He's playing at a superstar level. And as an organization, when you have a guy playing like that, you have to operate as such. So, have you ever watched Boiler Room?
Yes.
Act as if, act as if, and the Knicks need to act as if, because it's not an if, they got one. Whether they, if you want to, they fluked out, they got luck, whatever, it doesn't matter. They got one. They got a superstar. He's here. They did it. So once you get that guy in house, you have to change a lot of things about how you operate and think and all those things. And I think it seems that they feel the same way, right? I don't think you make the OG trade unless you believe that there's a higher level to unlock with the group. If you change some personnel and whatever, they've been proven right there as far as I'm concerned. Like I don't, anybody that still regrets the OG trade. I honestly, I think I want to say after the first game they played with OG, I was like, all right, so if they get like a good backup point guard, they could probably win the East. I was like already there. So, yeah, like they seem to be operating with that mindset, and I think that's important because like you got a guy, and you know, like I grew up watching, those '90s Knicks teams with Ewing, and obviously we both and a bunch of people, not just us, but like younger generation saw Carmelo Anthony, and those teams either didn't or couldn't add the another high level piece next to him. I think the talent around Brunson is better than what those guys had available to them in a lot of ways. Maybe it's a little bit weird talking about it with Ewing because you're talking about it relative to the talent in the league at the time. Same with Melo. The East was not as good, so all that stuff is fair. But like these pieces around Brunson right now are as good as anything those guys ever had. But you can't be satisfied with that, and you've always got to be aggressive about adding talent and have a sense of urgency, especially when you have a guy like Jalen Brunson. And yeah, for me, like I was very much against trading for Donovan Mitchell at the time that he was traded from Utah. I didn't think it made sense for us as a team, especially at the price that ultimately was paid and what Utah wanted from us. But now things are different, and I would be very, very happy to have Donovan Mitchell here, and I think the Knicks should be willing to, make a significant offer for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about they have a superstar and you have the urgencies there can be a couple of ways to go. One is, to your point, seize on any move, right? That seize on a big move to maximize it. Other might be, if he is a superstar, do you need another star, or is it better to keep making moves with guys who accentuate him, right? OG Anunoby he's the ultimate guy who accentuates a guy like Brunson because he covers for him on defense, covers for everybody on defense. He allows you to get away with playing guys like Bogdanovich, right? Who allow that spacing, but still don't lose the defensive identity. I mean, Matt Miranda talked about this. He made a comparison to the Iverson Sixers, and he said a big difference was a lot of those guys were one-way players, right? McKee, Snow, aging Mutombo, right? Whereas the Knicks have surrounded the way the Knicks are making that blueprint work with a small guard, very ball dominant, who does the heavy lifting on offense, is they've had a lot of two-way guys, right? So can you keep adding two-way guys? Maybe I'm not saying he's available, but a Trey Murphy type, right? Or can you hit another home run in the draft? Do you go for another role player that accentuates Brunson because he's that good? And that's more important, because the other sense is if you trade for the wrong quote unquote star, Melo, whatever you want to criticize him, even when Stoudemire was healthy, they just didn't work very well together. It probably would have made more sense at that point, if they could have gotten a guy like Chris Paul, or if they could have, if they had somehow, they probably couldn't have traded for Williams and Melo. If Melo comes in free agency, who knows, right? But it's about also finding the right fit. So I think that's some of the consternation. I am with you. I'm going to make that case in a second. And I think the other part of it is, I'm with you. I think it's a no-brainer if it's like Dante and Mitch and picks. But I do want to say that I get why people, the Strickland would have some backlash. One, do you need another scorer? It's another scoring guard. Does that really accentuate Brunson? I think it does, but that's one question, right? And in the past, you've seen that when you trade for a star and those two guys have a lot of overlap or don't accentuate each other, I get that. And the other concern I think is just it is the vibes. Obviously DiVincenzo, Hart, Brunson, best friends. The vibes on this team are great, right? And it almost feels like if you make that star trade, that's been part of the fun of this year is that you have all of these guys playing above their head. And it's fun to root for a team like that, to see them grow and play like stars often for guys who aren't known like that. Are you kind of selling your soul a little bit if you say, all right, we are going to go the superstar route? The reason why I would push back on both of those, one, I don't think there are fit questions with Brunson and Mitchell. The only real fit question I had, especially one, we didn't know Brunson was this after Utah, but the fit question I would have had is neither of them were good defenders at that time. But I do think one on offense, the fit makes a lot of sense to me. They're both very good off ball. Mitchell has shown himself as a cutter. They both are guys who ideally want the ball in their hands, but we've seen the biggest weakness this team has is that the offense dies completely when Brunson goes off the floor. That would no longer be an issue, provided Thibs staggers, which I think he would if he had Donovan Mitchell. So I don't have concerns with the fit. People have brought up.
Is it also? It's also fair to say this. Like we talked about, kind of Tibbs' progression as a coach, but like another reason to be more optimistic about this pairing now is because you're like, okay, no, Tibbs isn't married entirely to the size of like he has to have X dimensions in terms of physical attributes, height, whatever on the floor at all times. He's obviously grown a lot in that way as a coach.
He's played Dante, Brunson, and McBride. I hope he does in the playoffs too. He's played the three of those guys together, right? So there's less, and I think they now have the personnel where you can do that with OG. You can do that if you have Hartenstein. You can do that if you have Josh Hart. There's talk, with Dante does a lot of good off ball stuff. He's a little taller than Mitchell. Mitchell is strong as hell. At point of attack, I'm not really sure you really love DiVincenzo guarding those guys. It's usually going to end up being Hart or OG anyway. So I'm not sure that really caused any fit issues with Brunson. Even besides Brunson, I haven't seen people really pick on Donovan Mitchell on defense. It's really been Brunson who's been the guy that, and so obviously they'd be teammates then. So I don't really think it's the wrong star in that sense. I think it fits a need where the Knicks need more scoring besides Brunson, and Randall kind of is just the interior guy. So you'd probably want another creator with the bench. So he fits a need there. Obviously takes their offensive ceiling to another level, and he can play off ball too. Very good cutter, very good finisher. Can obviously shoot. And then there's the vibes part where there's two things. One, Mitchell is obviously very close with Brunson and Hart, and seems like a pretty good guy. I think he's a very well liked guy around the league. There's questions about in Utah, did he quit on his team? Obviously, his defensive intensity has really improved here in Cleveland. So those are never great things to see. But he seems to be pretty well liked. This guy doesn't seem like an asshole or something, and he has good relationships with the players on the team. Obviously, loves New York. He's a local. So from a vibe standpoint, I think I would say like there's a lot of reason to believe it would work out. But there's also the fact that, look, in terms of the vibes, remember when we did, that was a big reason why people were a little bit apprehensive about the OG trade. I think you talked about it. OG's kind of like he came across as boring, and you have this guy in Quickly who plays with a lot of joy. We're trading away kids for a guy who like hasn't shown that he can create much off the dribble. He's very stoic in all of that. And that hasn't been an issue, right? It hasn't changed the culture. If anything, it's accentuated the culture. And that's not to say that losing quickly doesn't hurt it, but I think if you're worried that if you're trading away Dante DiVincenzo and bringing in Mitchell, that the culture is going to be hurt, I think I get it because the culture is so great and you don't want to risk it. But it's not like they're trading for, the kind of guy who has that reputation or doesn't know these guys. And we've seen it when people have had consternation about that. It's worked out pretty well. This front office has a good gauge on that. They have culture setters. Thibs hasn't really lost guys like that. If it was Cat, that's an example, right? If they trade for Cat, I think that maybe is more of an issue, right? Even if they traded for a guy like Booker, maybe you worry a little bit more than you would with Mitchell on that front. But with Donovan Mitchell, I'm not worried about it. And I think this front office, to your point, and this coach and these guys have shown that they can make it work in that sense, and they don't lose their culture.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And also, like, the culture is established to some degree, right? Like, obviously, it's not just down to one player or one coach or whatever. But the key principles to all this are Tom Thibodeau, Jalen Brunson, Leon Rose, and yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say Julius Randle to some degree. Not to some degree, actually. That's kind of selling him short to a large degree.
And hard, I would say, just in terms of
yeah, for sure. But like, if you don't, like, those guys are the key to your culture. As long as they're here, I don't anticipate the culture becoming dog shit or changing drastically.
I mean, you'd have to trade for like a real somebody who like has a history. I think you'd have to trade for like a
real, what?
Yeah, I guess, right. Which, and I'm not going to say, I did say a name. I think Cat gets a little bit of an unfair rap, and but that would be at least where there's some history where you'd be apprehensive. I don't think that's really a thing with Mitchell. Like, he's not like a sourpuss guy. He's never shown I think he adapted pretty well to playing next to Garland. He's looked a lot better without Garland, but you never really saw them fighting each other for the ball or struggling to coexist last year. I don't know. Maybe you disagree, but I don't think he doesn't strike me as that kind of guy at all.
No, yeah, no, I don't think that's at all a concern, or it shouldn't be a concern. Anyways, with Mitchell, but like, yeah, he's not somebody who I think is gonna like rock the boat and be a huge asshole or any of that type of stuff. I understand there's a risk because him and Brunson are obviously on the shorter side of a backcourt pairing. He's not like some elite defender. How does he adapt his usage playing with Brunson and presumably Randall? All those type of things are fair game, and those are conversations I think are like worth having. Like, I'm totally open to the idea that maybe the basketball fit isn't perfect there, and maybe there's like, not maybe, but there could be valid reasons why, just in terms of the actual on court effectiveness of that group or that pairing wouldn't be great. I'm open to that idea, but I think the Knicks have to, and they should, and they can now, and fans need to adjust for this too, is like, I think it's time, and it took me a while too, right? This was one of my concerns with the OG trade, but now that we've seen kind of the results of that trade and just how the team looked and all that type of stuff, you have to move off of we have to let's keep looking for value on the margins, and like, I don't think you're gonna just keep. I don't think making margin moves, and I mean margin moves. Like, I'm not talking about like, oh, they got value in a trade. I'm talking about like, no, like pushing the margins. You're not gonna win a championship just by making margin moves, which they proved. Like, whatever you think about the trade, like the OG trade was a significant trade, right? It was like they gave up 2 core pieces to get OG. So it's a significant move. I don't think they're operating on the margins anymore. Like, I mean, yes, you're always operating on the margins in a way, but like, I think that the moves you have to make are more significant now. And if that means that, you've got to do a Thanos, and what did it cost you?
Everything.
Maybe it might be worth it. And like, I love Dante. I think Dante's been, he's been better than I could have I expected anyway. And quite honestly, I was like bullish on them signing Dante too. So he's exceeded even my expectations.
I don't
You
think
know,
anyone thought he'd be truly one of the best shooters in the NBA, which I think
yeah,
is a very fair thing to say.
yeah, it's crazy. Like he's literally playing as at elite shooter levels. Um, and even with that, I'm like, man, I don't know. Like I feel like Donovan Mitchell is still a pretty clear cut upgrade. Maybe I'm wrong. I look after the OG trade, I am prepared to be wrong about a lot of things. But like to me, it's like, man, I get that. Yeah, you're gonna have to figure out some stuff with how to balance the usage of Brunson and Mitchell and Randall together, assuming Randall is back, which I think he will be, and I think they will extend him this offseason. But like, assuming, like, yeah, I get those concerns and all that stuff, but like, I think the risk reward is worth it now, especially again now that you have OG, and obviously depending on the price. Like, I think if you to me, I know this probably sounds fucking crazy to some people, but like, for example, I feel like keeping Deuce would be very, very key in terms of having the right pieces post a Mitchell trade. Um, and whatever. I mean, that's what it is. But like, so it's all pending what the price would be to get him. But I think if the price is something like Bogey and Dante and picks and something like that, like, yeah, I'm comfortable making that move as much as good as Dante has been. Like, and to your point, like Mitchell he's friends with Brunson and he's friends with Josh Hart. Like we know that, and obviously we know he has a connection with Leon Rose. Like, I'm not worried about like, oh, how will the vibes be affected. I think the vibes will be fucking fine. I think they'll be fucking great, actually.
Yeah, it's one interesting thing about DiVincenzo and Mitchell is that their names are literally right next to each other on the NBA website by alphabetical first name order. So it's easy to
Yeah, I don't
compare them.
understand why the NBA does it that way. It's so weird.
But happy coincidence. So in terms of shooting, they're on catch and shoot. Mitchell is shooting 41.1% on 3 attempts per game. DiVincenzo is taking 7 catch and shoot threes a game and shooting an identical 41.1%, which is pretty insane, by the way. As pull up shooters, Mitchell's volume is much higher. Obviously, he's taking 6 pull up threes per game, making 34% of them, which is pretty solid. And obviously, he's being asked to do a lot. DiVincenzo's down at 1.3, but he's shooting 38% on those pull ups. So I think Mitchell probably gives you a little bit more versatility as a pull up shooter, whereas you know and whereas Dante, you could, if you want to say Dante's probably even better as a shooter, that's fair. But you are trading for a very versatile, high efficiency, high volume shooter in Mitchell, right? So in terms of that part of it alone, the fact that even in shooting, DiVincenzo doesn't really outstrip him by that much is a pretty big deal. You can ask Prez, the movement shooting stuff, maybe in terms of coming off like pin downs and stuff, DiVincenzo does that a little bit more. But I think that they need that pull up element and that creation a lot too. But even if you wanted to give DiVincenzo the edge there in shooting, I mean, everything else, as you mentioned, is not particularly close. Ability to get to the rim. I think Mitchell's a better playmaker. He's really improved since his Utah days, especially as a passer and creator. So I think that that it doesn't, in terms of a replacement, it doesn't really feel that close to me. And that's not a knock on DiVincenzo. There's a reason why Brunson's been a top 10 player, but I would agree that Mitchell's also right up there. There's a reason for that. And then the other part, I do agree with you on Deuce, and Deuce is part of the reason why you would be a little bit more comfortable trading DiVincenzo, is because you say, well, you lose this guy who's a high volume 3-point shooter who does lots of glue guy stuff on defense, and he's a good connector. Well, Deuce is doing that right now. And obviously DiVincenzo is taller, but he doesn't have the longest wingspan. McBride and Mitchell both have 6'8", 6'9" wingspan. I think Mitchell's 6'10". So in terms of a size thing, it's not that big a difference there either. Arguably, there are things that both those guys do, but McBride himself is shooting 42% from three. It's 4 attempts per game. That's controlled for minutes. For per 100 possessions, he's taking 10.3 attempts per game. So he's been shooting the ball extremely well. Now, Dante's are preposterous. Dante, I think, is taking 16 3-point attempts per 100, which is absolutely insane. For context, a couple years ago, Fournier took 12.9 3-pointers per 100. So DiVincenzo was shooting an insane volume. But McBride gives you a lot of that as well. And
for Deuce is taking 10.3 threes per 100 possessions also.
Yeah, so DiVincenzo is taking an absurd amount compared to anyone. Period. I think that's probably higher than anyone named whose last name isn't Curry. So, you are losing that, but you're adding a guy who's a very good shooter. It's not like we're trading for DeRozan. You have another guy who you can rely on to take on a lot of that in McBride, and especially with the bench, and is a good catch and shoot guy who can connect and all of that, and is a really good I think he's actually a better defender than Dante. And then the other part is you probably lose a guy like Mitch and Bogey. Bogey, you probably need a lot less if you have Mitchell, because you're going to be able to stagger and have more help on the bench. You might even need him less next year anyway, because even if we don't trade for Mitchell, Randall is going to be back, so he can stabilize bench units. Although they've struggled with that a little bit, and it's probably not as matchup proof as a guy like Mitchell. And then you lose, and then you talk about Mitchell Robinson. But the thing is, I think Mitch is, sad to say, investing $30-35 million a year in Hartenstein and Mitch is probably, I get it. Having 48 minutes of that level of center play is great. And Precious has come back down to earth a little bit, but you're going to pay Hartenstein like a top 10 center. You're going to have to. You probably can't invest in both of those guys. You can't play them together. So at that point, it probably, you can sign a guy who gives you a good backup center. Or draft. I think there's a couple of interesting guys in this draft, and roll with it. But this is the kind of move where there isn't a whole lot of downside, and the upside of 48 minutes of that level of scoring, while also having OG and Hart and Deuce as pretty high level defenders, and Hartenstein, and you still have Randall. To me, there might be less risky moves. There's risk inherent in any deal, but boy, does this feel like one where the downside really isn't that much. Worst case scenario in that Brunson and Mitchell don't completely mesh. The Knicks are probably still right where they are then, right? I don't see a whole lot of downside in that move.
Yeah, and also worth noting that the Knicks almost never say you have to. Don't operate as if you have to do anything. But in a lot of ways, this is kind of like the ideal time to strike this offseason for a lot of cap reasons that I don't really care to get into, and just take my word for it. Or if not,
well, I mean, it comes down to you're going to have to extend Brunson.
Likely, look, OG's getting a new contract. Randall's extension eligible. Brunson is extension eligible. Probably won't sign one. Probably will just sign it the following offseason. Look, if he takes the extension this offseason, we should probably build a fucking statue for him already. Yeah. Hartenstein is going to get a new contract. So there's a lot of stuff that's already accelerating onto your cap sheet that you need to plan for. So this does feel like a critical offseason in terms of if you're going to make a big move, this is kind of the time to do it. But
Hart's new contract kicks in next year as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. Fair to say. Yeah. It's not like he's going from 12 point, whatever the hell he's making this year. I think it's like 12.1 to about 20. 18 or whatever the hell it is. So yeah, they've got a lot of stuff, and this is kind of the time to strike, but we'll see what they do. I mean, they've got options, or they likely will have options. I imagine that Donovan Mitchell will not be the only star or superstar, or however you want to put it, that is on the market this summer. the nature of the league is that multiple guys generally will be available. Um, there's a chance that Joel Embiid becomes available. I actually kind of feel like he won't, but we'll see. It's obviously possible he does, and I'm sure the Knicks would have interest.
Is there a
But
reason why people think Cat is gonna? I don't see why the Timberwolves would move Cat right now because I mean
money,
they've been playing pretty well, right?
money.
This is the new contract kick in.
Yeah, 60 million for him, basically.
That
And
sounds like a move that you would not be in favor of.
I definitely would not be in favor of, and I hope that Troy Weaver is getting prepared to bring Cat home to Detroit.
Even if it was a 1-for-1 swap, Randall for Cat.
I am very, very good on not trading for Cat. I would much prefer to not trade for Cat.
Do you think there's any truth to the idea that Booker might be available? Because I think we've talked about this, and he said he's got 5 years on his extension. Like he has no kind of wiggle room. But obviously,
I
the team
mean,
has underachieved a little bit.
you can't never say never. It's the NBA, but like, yeah, I just don't know what leverage he has to be like, all right, trade me. Got to do it. Got to do it. And like, even if he goes into their office and is like, you got to get me out of here. I want out. If I'm Matt Ishbia, I'm gonna be like, yeah, I don't care, dude. Just not gonna do it.
Devin Booker cannot eclipse the Suns' best interest, right? So that was topical. Come on, there was a solar eclipse yesterday.
Wow. But yeah, no, like
I really hope Josh Hart did use. There's a picture of him using the glasses. We posted.
Yeah,
so.
hopefully he did. He that the picture was not a bit, and that he actually just kept the glasses on. But yeah, like I don't know. Cat does nothing for me. But they do. I mean, there will be players that are available. You know, who knows?
If Paul George is available, is that a guy you would target, or at this point, maybe?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know.
If it's really cheap, you know, like if it's just like
well, he hasn't signed an extension yet, so he's effectively a free agent in summer.
You'd have to move money around, all right? You'd have to.
No, they can't sign him. I mean, to clear the cap space to sign him, it would be ridiculous.
It would be Mitchell and Bogdanovich at minimum, right? So you'd have to send them in a sign and trade.
Yeah, I mean that's what you'd have to do.
Not Mitchell, sorry, Robinson.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how that would work. I don't think it's something that the Knicks. I feel like if they were going to do the Paul George thing last summer was the time to do it. To do it now, I don't know. Just doesn't really it doesn't really add up to me. But yeah, they'll have options. But the point ultimately is that the summer is probably an ideal time for them to do it for a lot of reasons, or to make a significant move. And we know they've been saving their picks and all that stuff to make a significant move at some point. This feels like it could be the summer where it happens. We'll see. Because we also know that they won't make a move just to make a move. And they have shown that they will not be owned in any negotiation. So we'll see. Even though Raptors fans, the new thing is that apparently Masai owned Leon Rose.
Well, they should be happy that they got RJ's playing really well. They should be. I think it's a win-win. You know, like, you know, in OG has the injury issues, but when he's played, it's taken the Knicks to contender level status. Full stop. They're 16.
The Knicks were 17-15 when they made the trade.
Were they really that bad? And the early season schedule, it should be noted, the early season schedule was brutal, and I had expected that they would be flirting with 500 for a while until like right after that stretch. But yeah, people forget, like even then, the optimistic view was something like 45.
They'll be like I mean the view at that point was like, yeah, they're good, but they can't beat the best teams in the league.
I mean, they were on level with, like, you know, Pacers, right? Heat, that level of team. They just lost the Heat, but like obviously at full strength, and even without it, you'd consider them a bigger threat. And the Raptors get to start afresh, and they add, I think, one of the best guys to pair with Scotty Barnes in quickly, and RJ seem to be playing a lot better at home. So it's a win-win situation. I don't think Cy owned Leon Rose, and I don't think the reverse is true. It worked out.
Yeah, I mean it's hard though, because they did lose Malachi Flynn in the trade too.
50. He averaged a 26.5 points per game over a 2 game stretch. So
Yeah,
um, um, when they got Precious in the, I still think that is going to pan out well as well. To your point as well, the Knicks do have 2 draft picks this year. It is not the best draft. It'll be interesting to see what they do there, but whether they use those picks in a trade or those guys provide depth that maybe you wouldn't have if you kind of consolidate for Mitchell, that's another useful thing to have this year. But the offseason can wait. We do have an exciting playoffs coming up. Wherever the Knicks end up, I think we can debate what the matchups are and all of that. What do you I think there's some interesting rotation decisions, really between Deuce, Precious, and Bogdanovich. You would think Bogdanovich is kind of the on the outs at this point with OG back, just because of, did I say Bogdan? Precious is on the outs a bit, I think. I'll also add, there's been people who have said, "Oh, Precious." I've seen people complain both ways. There were games where Bogdanovich closed. Why wouldn't you play Precious? He was playing great. And then I've seen the opposite, where people are like, "How could you play Precious at the 4? It kills the spacing." So Thibodeau has gone both ways, and it is a tough decision. But I would have to imagine Bogdanovich is going to get some more minutes at Precious's expense. I am curious, how much are there specific teams where you would like to see that 3 guard lineup more with Deuce, Dante, and Brunson? How often do you think we'll go to it? Especially since Deuce is, even against threes, probably a better defender than Bogdanovich.
sorry, say that again.
How much do you think are there specific teams you want to see that 3 guard lineup against, Dante, Deuce, and Brunson? And which teams are those? And how much do you think it'll happen in the playoffs?
I think that's pretty viable against every team in the East aside from maybe Boston.
I mean, if you have Middleton out at the 3, like, that's a tough matchup for Deuce, right? Or Dante.
It's tough, but I don't. I mean, look, the other part that needs to be said with OG back, like the odds are that we won't see a lot of that lineup, that grouping. It'll probably still happen during the course of a game, but I don't think we're going to get a ton of it.
Well, I mean, the question is, when OG rests, you need someone. When OG rests, is it worth putting in Bogdanovich or is it worth putting in McBride?
Oh no, but
right?
I look. Precious has definitely fallen back a bit.
Well, I'm saying McBride, right? Like, when OG rests, is it worth putting in McBride or Bogdanovich? I think Precious versus Bogdanovich, to your point, is probably pretty cut and dry at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Bogdanovich has seemed to find his rhythm over the last 4 or 5 games, which has been huge for the Knicks. But I don't know. Like, I think the Deuce thing is different because to me, there's more variables. Like when you get OG back now, obviously your rotation changes. We saw Deuce, what he played. I think he only got like 18 or 19 minutes against the Bucks. This is a guy that was playing basically league leading minutes over the previous, however many games. I mean, ultimately, like I don't think anything should be set in stone. I think things need to be variable, and Deuce. As long as Deuce is an option and a genuine option, somebody that Thibs trusts, I think, and hopefully Bogdanovich gets to that point also. Like, that's all I think that really matters. Is that you want Thibs to be able to trust these guys in various lineups and situations. And I think Deuce has gotten there at this point. Like, the fact that he started him and played him in those undersized lineups as long as he did speaks to that. Bogdanovich, we'll see. I mean, obviously the shooting of late has been much better than it was prior, and not just that. It seems like he's playing with a higher level of comfort and all those type of things.
He's playing hard on defense too. Like,
Yeah, I actually think he's, again, like, you play a year and a half in Detroit, like you might cut some corners. Let's put it that way. And obviously when you play for Thibs and you play in New York and you play on a team that is fighting for everything the Knicks are fighting for, you have to produce and you have to compete and you have to do all these things at a higher level. And I think he's adjusted to that, or I think he was adjusting to that, and I think now he is there. And I also think, like, look, this is a guy who was a 20 point per game efficient type level scorer in Detroit, like coming to New and starting games, right? Like he's been a starter forever. He talked about this. To now get traded in midseason, and it's like, okay, you come off the bench. I never felt that he was like operating the way Burks was, where he was just like, dude, are you fucking kidding me? You're just chucking a bullshit right now. I didn't think that way about Bogdanovich. I feel like Bogdanovich is a little bit more of a, I don't want to say cerebral is the wrong word, but I think he was a little bit more of like a high field player. Let's put it that way. And I think he was feeling his way through his initial period in New York, and now I think he understands, like, hey, like this team actually does need me. Like I can't just be out here trying to be teammate number one. Like, yes, obviously be a good teammate, but they do need me to score. I do need to look for my shot, and I should be comfortable looking for my shot. Like the entire point of getting him was, hey, if we can't get a quality backup point guard, maybe we don't want one. Maybe we want to give Deuce that opportunity. We still need somebody who can create offense when Brunson sits. And I think for a lot, not entirely, but I think part of Bogdanovich's adjustment was like, yes, you're coming to a serious team. Yes, you're coming and you're gonna be like a piece of the rotation, not like a main. He's not like a fucking franchise bedrock or something. But that doesn't mean we just want you to stand in the corner and space the floor. Like, no, we need you and we want you to look for your own shot, look to create offense. We need you to do that. And I think of late he's been comfortable calling his own number in a way that he wasn't when he first arrived. So, I don't know if that really answered your question at all, but like, I don't necessarily know that it's about pick one or who. Like, to me, there are situations where Deuce will be more valuable than Bogdanovich, and there are situations where Bogdanovich will be more useful than Deuce. So Thibs, to his credit, has shown an ability to be flexible and adjust situationally in a way that he hadn't prior in his coaching career. And I think as long as he approaches those decisions with that same type of mindset, I think the Knicks are in a totally great spot.
Yeah, and I think with Burks, to your point earlier, I do think it was fair. Probably went longer than Knicks fans wanted. I know I was over the Alec Burks experience pretty quickly. He just doesn't look like the same player, and he's, if anything, had more tunnel vision. That could be part of it, right? The more you feel not as dynamic, maybe you are just going to rely just on what you know, which is taking those shots. But with Bogdanovich, he was just missing some shots that we know he can make. The defense and kind of the lack of juice was, I think, the most concerning part. But I think he's comfortable with the offense, and honestly, with those bench minutes, you just need to eat a few minutes at a time, and just if he can get that midi pull up and he can hit those shots, and that's just, even Deuce has become more of an effective mid range shooter, but it's not the same when you're 6'8" and he can get it off against anybody. He's probably a little bit better at hitting off balance shots than Deuce. He's a pretty solid passer. I think that's also improved since in the beginning he really didn't know what he wasn't comfortable with the other guys. That's improved. And we're talking about 12, 13 minutes a game, less really in the playoffs, where we just need the offense to tread water while Brunson is out. And you surround him with guys like Hart, potentially OG, Mitch, and even his defense probably isn't that crippling, right? I think Thibs has also learned, I think, with those kind of movement players, those kind of guys who thrive in a little bit more of a less of a stagnant system. I wonder, if this version of Thibs got even Evan Fournier when we got him, maybe that would have worked out a little bit better. I think Bogdanovich is a little bit well, then it did, right? Not obviously there were still better players than him, but I think that Thibs is probably a little bit, with all of these guys, he's allowed them to play more dynamic, and that's helped kind of these fits. So, Bogdanovich resurging at this time is pretty encouraging. Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to be in a dogfight no matter whatever the first round series is. I think Orlando, like I said, I think the Knicks are a better team. I think they'll have by far the best player on the floor, but that's a team that has length and has a lot of talent. If they play Cleveland, that's probably the matchup I feel most comfortable with, especially since Mitchell doesn't seem to be at 100%. But they seem to have, as much as losing Randall hurts, they seem to have the artillery to do some damage, and I think it's gonna be fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree. All right, I think that's a good place to end it. Stacy, let people know where they can find you and plug anything that you'd like to plug.
You can find me at StacyPadden89. I'll continue to plug all the great work being done at the Strickland, especially the recap yesterday. I think the comparison and kind of the level of detail that Miranda went on, looking historically, at this big question: can you win with a guy Brunson's size as your best player, and why this might work for the Knicks? I think it's a really good read, and Miranda's stuff is always great. Some really good one-liners in there too. So I'll plug that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Miranda he's been churning out some wonderful work. His piece on Julius Randle's absence that was on Patreon was really, really good. So if you are subscribed, definitely read it. And if you're not subscribed, maybe subscribe. It's worth it. Miranda's good at what he does. All right. That is our pod for today. I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. Thank you to everybody for listening, and shout out to everybody at Strickland for all the work that they're doing. That is the show for today, and I will see you. And also, of course, thank you to our sponsors, Bet Online and Cut. And I will see everybody on Friday.